If I handed you $100 right now, how would you feel? Now, what if I handed you $100 and told you to give it to someone who needs it more? Which of those two would make you feel richer? How many of you would say the second? A couple of you? I would. I'd just give that money away, right? That's one reason I would be an excellent rich person. But it's strange, isn't it? We think of wealth as something we hold on to. But what if the richest moments in life are the ones we let go? This is what I've been thinking about as we move into the season of gratitude. Many of you know my wife and ministerial colleague, the Reverend Julia Jones. This past week, she's been thinking about the persistent myth of that first happy feast held by the Pilgrims and the Indians somewhere near Plymouth, Massachusetts. As some of you know, history is very much at odds with that myth, and the long story short is that this was not a happy time. But as Julia and I recalled, that particular truth was clearly not obvious. Not obvious, certainly not from the artwork that our grade school kids crafted, which was all colorful turkeys assembled out of finger paint and tiny handprints. For my own part, what little I remember of what I was told as a kid way back then was about gratitude. That Thanksgiving was a time to be grateful, that we ought to celebrate gratitude. Thanksgiving was a time to count our blessings of food, family, shelter, community, and to celebrate the joys we had and not the joys we did not. I'm guessing that many of you have had similar experiences. Maybe saying grace at the family meal, being told to be grateful, maybe even being asked to share a thing that you yourself were grateful for. I remember that. I remember the family member who would hold the table hostage as they enumerated a sudden and seemingly endless list of things that they were grateful for. And I remember my brother saying that maybe if we were all grateful at other times during the year, his gravy wouldn't get cold. I like to think of myself as a grateful person. I don't say grace at dinner, but I do say please and thank you a lot, and I think that should count for something, even if it's more an indication of reflex, an insurmountable bit of childhood training, more that than anything intentional that I'm actually trying to do, much less some kind of studied, stoic response to the vagaries of life in times of upheaval and change. These last few weeks here at UUSG, Tom and Kim have been leading a group of us through a series of spiritual practices. This class is designed to deepen our awareness, our connection to ourselves and the mystery that unfolds us, to help us stretch in ways that could be meaningful, enriching, and powerful. It's a good class. And during one of these Wednesday night sessions, I was reminded of a practice of my own, my gratitude practice. Anybody ever have a gratitude practice? They're interesting, right? So 5 minutes for me, it was 5 minutes every morning, journaling just 3 things I was grateful for. This simple act, I was told, would cultivate my physical and emotional well-being. And I was pretty good at it for a few weeks, and I like to think, I like to think that the time was well spent. I honestly don't do it anymore, and it's probably explains why Kamala Harris lost the election. Anyway, maybe it's me. Yeah, too soon, right? Sorry. Apologies. Anyway, maybe it's me. Maybe it's the election. I don't know. But I have started to rethink this gratitude thing. I've been thinking a lot about what Michelle Obama urged people to do at the Democratic National Convention. She said, do some things. Do something. A lot of you took that advice and did something. And some of you are probably wondering if maybe you should have done something different. This game of Monday morning quarterback is a fun game, but it doesn't accomplish much. And neither does gratitude. But let me back up. My seminary used to make a big deal about the difference between orthodoxy and orthopraxy. Orthodoxy means right belief. It's what the Christian church has been seeking for 2,000 years, right belief. And it is also why many churches have trouble with people asking too many questions. And yes, you know who you are. Orthopraxy, on the other hand, means right action, right action. And my seminary taught us that right action often leads to right belief. Weird as it may sound, it turns out that there's actually good data for this. Turns out many times we discover what we actually believe by what we do. And if that's so, then maybe this Thanksgiving we should take a harder look at gratitude. Gratitude is lovely. It feels good. It's warm and safe, like wrapping yourself in a cozy blanket and saying, I am so thankful for all that I have. But gratitude by itself doesn't do anything. You can be grateful all day long and never change a single life, not even your own. Gratitude is cheap. It costs nothing. Generosity, on the other hand, is where things get real. And perhaps that's why this past summer, we Unitarian Universalists updated our 7 principles and adopted in their place 6 core values, with generosity as one of those values. Of generosity, the UUA website says that it is how we, quote, cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. But I wonder if generosity and gratitude are related. What I want to say is that it's because gratitude is the spark and generosity is the flame, not the other way around. Because unlike gratitude, generosity costs you something. Your time, your resources, your presence. It means rolling out of that comfortable blanket and attempting to meet someone else's need. Where gratitude lets you stay in your head, generosity requires you out in the world. And action is the only thing that changes the world. And so, our moral calculus, maybe it matters more not what we're grateful for, but what we give of our time, our talents, our treasures. Last week, I told the story of the man in the hole. His friend, instead of pulling him out, jumped down into the hole with him. It's not what our guy was expecting, but as the friend explains, he's been down in the hole before, and he knows the way out. Like the parable of the Good Samaritan, the story provokes something unexpected, something that challenges our assumptions about obligation, about love, about generosity. As some of you recall from our sacred scriptures class, Samaritans and Jews were contemporaries with similar histories and similar faith traditions, very similar. Similar, but not exactly the same. To me, it sounded a lot like being English in Scotland. No matter what you do, you're Sassenach. Outsider, alien, not from around here. So when a Jewish traveler is left for dead at the side of the road, a road that's heavily traveled by Jewish priests, Jewish soldiers, Jewish citizens, we're told that none of them stop to help. Instead, it's the Sassenach, the alien, that takes the injured man to safety, the foreigner that pays for his care, the outsider who saves. This story would have been as uncomfortable to the ancient Jewish listener as it would be today if it were about a modern Jew rescued by a Palestinian in today's Gaza. It's shocking. It's meant to be shocking. So why did the ancient Samaritan do this? We don't know. That's not in the story. Jesus, however, clearly knows of this cultural divide and nevertheless implies that this is how all people ought to behave, that this is what neighbors do. And who is your neighbor? Not just the one who loves you, not just the one who's nice to you, not just the convenient one, but the one that needs you, the one you can and should help. That's generosity. Let me get a sip of water here. Some of you may recall a previous sermon where I mentioned the philosopher Peter Singer and his work on what he called effective altruism. Singer wants to push us toward an uncomfortable but important truth. If we can prevent something bad without sacrificing anything of comparable moral importance, shouldn't we do it? If we can prevent something bad, shouldn't we do it? Because it's not enough to feel bad about suffering or to be grateful that we are not suffering ourselves. Singer challenges our common and comfortable distance from the needs of others. Singer asks if we can help, and most of us can in ways large and small, then we must. Now, I've argued that this is an impossible standard to live up to, but I've also argued that the ideal is not the point. Even if we can't do everything, we can do something. Even if we can't solve every problem, we can ease some suffering. Even if we can't change the whole world, we can change someone's world. And here's where Buddhist wisdom offers us a transformative perspective. For Buddhists, generosity is the beginning of the path to enlightenment itself. We're taught that generosity is the antidote to suffering, that generosity is a sensible and practical approach to isolation, our seemingly innate fear of scarcity, and our persistent anxiety about the future. Buddhists teach that when we clutch tightly to whatever it is we have, we reinforce the illusion that we are separate, that our well-being is disconnected from others, that we can somehow find peace, security, and salvation in isolation. And here's what's fascinating. Buddhist psychology suggests that it is the very act of giving that begins to dissolve these illusions. Each time we give, whether it's our resources, our time, or just our attention, we create for ourselves little moments of freedom. We get to experience, however briefly, what it feels like to exist without the weight of self-protection, without the anxiousness of holding on, without the puzzling separation of one from another. Tibetan monks not only teach it, they live it. In refugee camps, after being displaced from their homelands, the monks are known to freely share what little food they have with any who ask. This isn't martyrdom or even self-interest, but instead it arises from a profound belief that our individual well-being is inseparable from the well-being of others, that we are inseparable from the other. And that when we practice generosity, we're not just helping others, we're actually creating the conditions for our own liberation from fear and isolation. We're building the kind of community that can sustain us through difficult times. Okay, so let's say that we want to respond to this call to practical goodness, that we are challenged by the moral mathematics, that we are inspired by generosity as a path to liberation. Monday morning still comes. The bills still arrive. The calendar remains full. The news continues to overwhelm. How can we practice generosity amid real constraints and legitimate fears? Let me suggest that we begin where we always ought to begin, where we are and with what we have. Remember the opening question about the $100? What feels richer? That point wasn't really about the money. It's about starting, about taking a step beyond comfortable gratitude and into active generosity. And that brings me to the homework portion of today's sermon. As you leave today, I want to challenge you. Find some way to give. Make an extra batch of soup for the soup brigade, or bake cookies for the cookie walk, or volunteer to drive someone to their doctor's appointments. Talk to Becky about teaching OWL. Our social justice team here at UUSG has completely revolutionized how we work in the community. You can donate a couple of hours to pack food for the Northern Illinois Food Bank, or serve at the Trinity Soup Kitchen, or make a casserole for Lazarus House. We are collecting resources for local vets, kids in needs, and displaced immigrants. And that's just the suggestions that you can find in the Mini Pioneer. But I'm not trying to make it easy. Feel free to get creative. What can you do at home or work? And not to make it a contest, but I'd actually love to know what you come up with. There are good stories here, and sharing those good stories is maybe how you inspire others to take similar paths. But if you really want to toss a $100 bill into the collection basket every week, I'm not going to complain. But here's something else to keep in mind. Generous people aren't saints or heroes. They get tired. They have doubts. They sometimes have to say no. The point is building generosity into the structure of regular life rather than treating it as an occasional luxury, something you only do at Thanksgiving, Christmas, or at our church fundraisers. Obviously, generous living can't be about grand gestures or can't be only about grand gestures, because that's emptying ourselves completely. It should be about creating practices that we can maintain over time. Sometimes that means giving money, sometimes that means giving time, and at other times it means just giving attention. What it means is giving from what we actually have and realizing that what we have is enough. Today, I want to say that individual acts of generosity are both beautiful and necessary, but they're also seeds of something larger. When we practice generosity consistently, we're not just helping individuals, we're literally building a different way for all of us to be together. When a community embraces generosity as a core practice, the questions change. Instead of asking, what can I afford to give, we start asking, what does my community need? Instead of wondering, do I have enough, we begin asking, how can we create enough together? In our current moment of isolation and polarization, this thinking is both revolutionary and dangerous. Study after study shows that Americans are becoming more disconnected, more isolated, more afraid of each other. But generous communities run counter to this trend. They create what sociologists call thick networks, webs of relationship and reciprocity that can hold us through difficult times. And it's not just theoretical. We see it in communities that embrace things like mutual aid networks, tool libraries, skill shares, time banks, and other ways that facilitate a generous exchange. And just to be clear, this isn't charity. These are networks of reciprocity that recognize that we all have something to give and that we all have needs that must be met. This is what becomes possible when we move beyond individual acts of generosity to building generous systems and structures. It's not just about creating a safety net, it's about weaving a fabric of care strong enough to hold us all. So how do we begin this work of building generous community? That question from the beginning about what $100 would feel like if you hold it or give it, it's a good question. I want to add another now. What if generosity isn't something we do when we have enough time, enough money, enough energy? What if generosity is how we create enough? Every morning, the world presents us with a choice. We can count our blessings, or we can become one. We can practice a safe gratitude, or we can risk a dangerous generosity. We can close our hands in fear, or we can open them in hope. Yes, the world is still troubled. Yes, our resources are still limited. Yes, the path ahead still seems uncertain. But every act of generosity sends a ripple through the web of our community. Every open hand is a space ready for connection. Every shared gift strengthens our collective heart. Each gesture declares, I believe in a world where we take care of each other. I believe in abundance created through sharing. I believe in community built up through giving. And I believe we can create it. You just have to want it. So tomorrow morning when you wake up, don't ask if you have enough to give. Ask what your giving might create. Don't count what you might lose. Count what we might gain together. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Create the perfect moment with generosity. My friends, this is how revolutions start. Not with dramatic gestures, but with open hands. Not with grand pronouncements, but with quiet persistence. Not with perfect certainty, but with faithful presence. Not with abundance already achieved, but with generosity freely offered. The revolution of generous hearts is already underway. The only question is, will you join it? Your hands are ready. Your heart is ready. The world, it's waiting. Amen, and blessed be.
Visit us at uusg.org.